2, 3, 4, go.
Good morning. Today is Beis Iyar. It is the birthday of the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Chabad Rebbe. It's known with his motto, L'chatchila riber. When you have a hurdle, instead of trying to circumvent a hurdle, just an obstacle, just go L'chatchila the way you're supposed to, and everything else will smooth itself out. In our Parshas Tazria, this week we have the two, it's a double header. We have for both portions of Tazria and Metzora. Parsha of Tazria begins, Isha ki Tazria v'yolda zocher. If a woman has a child, if she has a male, then she becomes tamei, defiled for 7 days. On the 8th day, the boy has to be circumcised, and then begins another 33 days of which she is pure, and on the 40th day she has to bring her carbon, her sacrifice. If it's a female, so she'll be tamei, she'll be defiled for 14 days, she'll be impure for 14 days, then she'll become pure for 66 days at the end of which, at the 80th day, she has to bring the carbon, actually at the 81st. The pasuk says, so what kind of carbon does she have to bring? The carbon she has to bring is a sheep, one sheep for oila, which is totally consumed on the mizbeach and on the altar, and a dove or a turtle dove for a chatas, for a sin offering, which is brought to the kohen. In verse 7, the pasuk says, "V'yikrivoi lifnei Hashem v'chiper aleha v'tardam k'redemel." You should offer it up before God and atone for her, and she will be totally purified from being called impure due to the source of her blood. The above is the law of a woman who gives birth to a male or to a female. And in verse 8, if she cannot afford a sheep, she should take 2 turtle doves or 2 young doves, one as a burnt offering and one as a sin offering. The kohen, the priest, should offer them and thereby atone for her, and she will become ritually pure. So on this pasuk, at the end of the portion dealing with a yeledes, with a woman who gives birth, that the kohen, the priest, should offer the sacrifices, atone for her, and she will become ritually pure. So the Gemara teaches us, V'toara miklal shehi tmeya. That from the fact that the Torah tells us that she'll become v'tahira, that she'll become pure, miklal shehi tmeya, this teaches us that somebody who didn't bring karbanos, he already immersed himself in water, and the new day already came, in other words, the sun set already, before he brought his carbon, he's considered tamei, impure, concerning a few laws. A, he still has the prohibition of b'chol kodesh leisigo, that he cannot eat karbanos, cannot eat from the burnt offerings. If shimesh b'beis hamikdash, if he served in the beis hamikdash, he is chayav misa. He deserves the death penalty, not through the court, but through the heavenly court, because tamei shimesh, an impure person who served in the beis hamikdash, is b'misa. He gets death through the heavenly court. C, as a mechusar kapurim, as one who didn't yet bring his karbonos, if he did the avodah, this avodah is no good and it has to be redone. The Rambam Maimonides in Sefer Hayad, in his book of Mishnah Torah, he brings this drasha in two locations. A, concerning Mechusar Kippurim She'ovad, that his avodah is no good, which he says in the laws of entering the Beis HaMikdash, chapter 4, halachas 4 and 5. B, concerning the prohibition of entrance into the Beis HaMikdash from the Eretz Yisrael onwards and from the inner courtyard, which is also in the same halachas of Beis HaMikdash, chapter 3, halacha Zayin. However, the Rambam brings it with a slightly different language. The language of the Rambam is v'tahara miklal shadayim lo nigmara taharosa. This tells us, the verse, that she will be purified. From here we see that until this point she has not completed her ritual purifications. So the Rambam writes in Hilchas Beis HaMikdash, the laws of retaining to those entering the sanctuary, chapter 4, halacha 5. With a slight difference in chapter 3, halacha 7. In chapter 3, halacha 7, he says that she had not yet finished her purification. And in chapter 4, he says that her purification was not yet completed. From the language of Maimonides, however, it is understood that the chisaron, the lack of a mechusar kippurim, of somebody who didn't yet bring his karbonos, it is not so much due to the positive fact that he is impure. In other words, although that through this that he had immersed himself in water and the sun has set, he became pure for many things, including also the eating of truma. However, concerning entering the Kodesh and entering the Beis HaMikdash and eating Kodesh, the Tuma, this impurity remains. And therefore he is prohibited in Kodesh and to enter the Beis HaMikdash, which is what comes out from Rashi's language. Rashi says that from the verse, she will be purified. From here we see that until this point she is called ritually impure. However, according to the language of the Rambam, it seems that this is due to the negation to a negative thing, that she's not totally pure, because it's lacking by her the total purity which is accomplished through the sacrifice. As the Rambam says in the beginning of the concept, explicitly in the beginning of the laws of Mechusari Kapara, of those who have not yet brought a carbon. V'lama nikru Mechusari Kapara. Why are they called that they're lacking a atonement? Shekol echad mehen, each and every one of those who are in this category of Mechusari Kapara, afal pishatar mitumasai, although he is purified from his impurity, and he has immersed himself in the water. V'hadim shimshoi, and his sun has set on him. Adayin hu chosei, he is still lacking. V'loi gomra taharosei, and his purity has not ended, and not been complete. Kidei lechol b'kodshim, in order that he or she should be able to eat from the sacrifices ad sheyavi karbonai, till he brings the sacrifice. V'koydem sheyavi kaparosai, and before bringing his sacrifice, asur hu lechel b'kodshim, he is prohibited from eating sacrifices. K'moisha bi'arnu in Psulei HaMukdoshin, as we have explained in Psulei HaMukdoshin. In other words, this prohibition is not because he is still impure, just because it's lacking in his purity, as it is proven also from this, that concerning the prohibition to enter the Beis HaMikdash, the Gemara learns it from the pasuk Oid Tum Asay Boy, his impurity is still within him. L'Rabbis Mechusar Kapora, that this comes to tell us that even somebody who's lacking a carbon is still considered impure. However, the Rambam learns it from the pasuk V'Torah Miklal Shadayin Legomro Tarosa, because it says V'Torah that she's pure, so we know that till now her purity is not yet complete. As it is emphasized in the different languages that the Rambam uses in the same halacha itself, in the laws of entry of the Beis HaMikdash, chapter 4, halacha 5, concerning a tful yoin, somebody whose impurity is time for him to immerse himself in the water. And he immersed himself in the water, but he did not yet, the sun had not yet set, and he did the avodah. He's still considered tameh, he's still considered impure. As it says in the pasuk, and the sun will set and he will become pure. It's a siman that he's not yet pure. However, somebody who is lacking karbonis, we know that if he did the avodah, it's no good. Why? Because it says v'chiper aleh ha'kohen v'tahira, the kohen will atone on her and she will become pure. Miklal shadayin lo nigmara taharasa. It is implied that her purity is not yet complete, as the Rabbaz points out over there. It is a difference. There's a difference, halacha b'poyel, an actual halacha between whether we say she's impure or just that the purity is not yet complete. Since the Rambam learns that a mechusar kippurim is not impure, it is merely that his purity has not yet been complete. Therefore, the Rambam rules that a mechusar kippurim, somebody who needs to bring karbonos and didn't yet bring his karbonos, who ate carbon or did avodah, he doesn't deserve heavenly death or karas, totally being cut off from his soul, totally being cut off from its connection to God. However, the Rebbe holds that a mechusar kippurim is chayav misa, and as he writes in his asagis, in his attacks on the Rambam, we said in Ma'akos, oid tumasei boi l'rabbis mechusar kippurim, and the pasuk oid tumasei boi is a place where from that pasuk we learn that one is chayav misa. So if we learn it, it's not just a difference of whether we learn it from this pasuk or the other pasuk, but if we learn it from the pasuk oid tumasei boi, which is in Parshas Chukas in Chumash Bamidbar, then is chayav misa. V'oid v'toheiro ksiv b'yeledes miklal da'anash totmeyehi. V'omrimen b'zvachim, and we say in Gemara Zvachim that mechusar kippurim the zav k'zav dami. We compare a zav who didn't bring his karbonis like the zav himself, and the zav himself, if he ate from the carbon or he served in the Beis HaMikdash, he is Chayav Misa. And in Tosefta of Zvachim, which was compiled by the Amoraim from the Brises, from those Tanoic sources that Rebbe did not include in the Mishnah, he mentions him together with those that are in Misa. The Kesef Mishnah, the Rebbe points out in footnote number 20 that the Kesef Mishnah in Beis HaMikdash, chapter 3, Halacha Tes, says that in the Gemara there's an argument. One man the Omer says that a Mechusar Kippurim of Azov is not compared to Azov, and another one says that he is compared to Azov. And the Rambam rules like the one who says that it's not compared to Azov. And the Rebbe points out that there's an argument between Rashi and Tosfos how to interpret this machlokes of whether it's like Azov or not like Azov, and the Rambam learns like Rashi over there. And this that the Kesef Mishnah had asked in the halachas of Beis HaMikdash over there in chapter 4, that the Rambam seems to contradict himself, because in the 19th chapter of the laws of Sanhedrin, Halacha Beis, he mentions a Mechusar Kippurim amongst those Mechuyavei Misa, those who are obligated death by heaven, that are also obligated Malchus, to be whipped if they did it with Hasra, with warning. So in the Kesef Mishnah, in the laws of Sanhedrin over there, in the name of Rabbi Yosef Kurkos, he says that it is a scribal error, and it has to be over there, since he mentions a certain amount of Mechuyavim Misa instead of Mechusar Kippurim, it should be Yosser B'Gadim, somebody who has wearing more clothes than he should be wearing. And similarly, the Radbaz explains over there. Why does the Ravid hold that a Mechusar Kippurim is Chayav Misa? Because the Ravid learns that the definition of a Mechusar Kippurim is that till you bring the Karpora, it still remains from the previous Tumah. It is only that the portion of the Tumah, of impurity, which removed, which stopped him from eating Truma, that portion of impurity was removed, expired. That portion of impurity expired. Also Rashi, in his commentary on Chumash, brings the drasha on V'tahira, but he changes from the language of the Gemara, but not like the Rambam. This is Rashi's language. V'tohara, she is pure. V'tahira, she is pure. Miklal sha'ad kan hikruya tmeya. We learn that from this, that till now, she is called ritually impure. This that Rashi doesn't say in the language of the Gemara, that we see that till now she is impure, one can explain from his previous commentary on the words Yemei Tahara. It says that she cannot enter the Mikdash, the Beis HaMikdash, till the days of her purity are complete. Rashi says, Yemei Toyar Shelo, her days of purity. Since Rashi says plainly days of purity, not days of purity to her husband, etc., this proves that these days are totally pure, totally days of pure which were completed. And this that the pasuk warns, B'chol kodesh lo'isiga, v'lamikdash lo'isavoy, that she cannot, even truma, she cannot eat. Not only can she eat kosher, but she cannot even eat truma. it is because of a technical cause. They're not yet full the days of purity. So, in other words, these days of purity, they are not of one status. Every day she becomes more and more pure, and when these days are up, then she becomes totally pure. So this proves that these days are totally pure. The days of purity that were completed, because the days of purity are up. So it comes out that according to Rashi, Pshuta Shel Mikra, the impurity of birth expires immediately after the 7 days for a male, or 7 days if she had a boy, or 14 days if she had a girl. How much more so after the 33 days are up, after the 7 days for a boy, after 7 days are up, then there's 33 days of purity. So how much the more so when these 33 days are also up, and we're up to the 40th day since she gave birth for the boy, before she brings the sacrifice, that she's completely pure. And therefore, it is understood why we cannot say on her the language that she is impure. Accordingly, it is understood the language of Rashi in Bechol Kodesh, when it says, L'rabbeis es ha-truma, that she's not allowed to eat truma during the 33 days. Lefi shezu tfulas yoim orich. And he says that it is like a long tful yoim. Tful yoim, we explained already, means if somebody immersed himself in water for the korban, but the sun didn't yet set up. So the Rashi says that usually by a tful yoim, the sun sets that day that you immersed yourself in water. As soon as the sun sets, you're done. Over here, it's you have 33 days. You need 33 days for you the sun to set on if it was a boy, and if you had a girl, if the woman had a girl, then the sun has to set on her 66 days once she immerses herself in water. And she immersed herself. If she had a boy, she immersed herself at the end of 7 days. And her sun does not set to purify her till the sunset of the 40th day, that on the next day, Tovias Kaboras Tarosa, shall bring the carbon of her purity. Why do you have to emphasize? Why is it important to emphasize that the next day shall bring the carbon, the offering of her purity? Just what this Rashi comes to say, that just like concerning the eating of karbonis after the days of purity are up, before she brings the carbon, it is only that it is merely that the obligation of the carbon prevents her from eating karbonis, but she is not impure. Likewise, it is also concerning the eating of truma in the 33 days, that it is not because she is tameh, she is impure, just because the obligation of the carbon of her purity holds her back and doesn't allow that the sunset of the previous days, prior to the sunset of the 40th day, should allow her to eat truma. And this is the reason of the difference between the language of Rashi in his commentary on Chumash and the language of the Gemara. According to Rashi on the Torah, which goes according to the literal meaning of the pasuk, we cannot use the language tmeya, impure, by a yeledes, a woman who gave birth, who her days are up and she's allowed to bring the sacrifice, but she didn't bring yet the sacrifice. Because even prior to that, prior to the sunset of the 40th day, it was already by her Yemei Toyar Shalah, her days of purity. According to the sheet of the Gemara, the 33 days are by her days of Tuma. Also concerning Truma, and before she brings her carbon, she is Tamei, she is impure concerning Kodesh and Mikdash. We have to understand, however, on the other hand, since according to Rashi, the impurity of birth expired, so it doesn't fit also the language of Rashi. Till now she is called impure. Rashi should have said, similar to the language of the Rambam, that her purity is not yet complete. If Rashi learns that she still has an obligation of a carbon, it stops her purity. In other words, it is not yet actually pure. That it's not merely that she is called impure, she's actually impure. We shall say, on the other hand, that the impurity expired, and this that she's not allowed to eat karbonos is a side prohibition from, it's not an issue of being called impure, just it's a prohibition to eat karbonos till she brings the carbon. From this it is understood that according to Pshutei Shel Mikra, according to the literal meaning of the pasuk, of the verse, the definition of Mechusa Kippurim by a woman who gives birth is on a third manner, not like the Rambam and not like the Gemara. The impurity of birth expired, for instance, when she had a boy immediately after the 7 days, and the later days are her days of purity, and therefore you cannot say on her that she is impure. However, the reason that she is prohibited from eating the sacrifices till she brings this sacrifice, it is not because it needs an additional purity which comes through the karbonos, but because a special law concerning a woman who gave birth, that even after the tumah, the impurity went away from her, the name of impurity still remains. She's still called impure till she actually brings the sacrifice for an atonement. And this is what Rashi says. He changes and emphasizes v'toheira. She is pure miklal. This implies she'ad kan hikruya tmeya, that till here she is called impure, not like in the Gemara miklal shehi tmeya. A, Rashi says she is merely called impure. B, but this is a continuation from previously, till here she is called impure. It is not a new thing that just happened now. The necessity on this, in the literal in sense of the verse, one can say it is denoted in the commentary of Rashi through another change from the Lashon of the Gemara. The Gemara learns it from verse 8, where it says that if she can't find the sheep, then she'll take 2 doves or 2 turtle doves, one for Oila, for a chatas, and the Kohen will forgive on her, and she will be pure. However, Rashi says it on the word v'tohara mimkar dameha, which is in pasuk Zayin, which speaks about the original case in which she brings the sheep for the Oila and the dove or the turtle dove for a chatas. How do we know that it's on pasuk Zayin, not on pasuk Ches? Because in the verse 8, after the words, before the words v'chipar Allah kohen v'tahira, it says echad la'oila v'echad l'chatas. And Rashi interprets those words echad la'oila v'echad l'chatas after the words v'tohara. If the reading in Rashi would have been V'toheda, and it was a reference to Pasuk Ches, he would have first explained the words Echad Lo'olav, Echad L'chatas, which come first, and then explained the words V'toheda. Since Rashi learns she's merely called impure, that this was also previously not an impurity, just the name of impurity, so it would make more sense to bring this drash on the word v'tohera in the end of the parsha than to bring it on the words v'tohara mimkor dameh, which emphasizes the activity of purity from impurity. Just the explanation in this is, without the pasuk v'tara mimkor dameh, we could have learned that the prohibition to eat karbonis has nothing to do with impurity. It is a side issue, which is due to the fact that she's still lacking the activity of the carbon. Since the pasuk uses precisely the word v'tara mimkor dameh, so it comes out that the taida that's lacking, it's not only because she didn't yet bring the carbon, but because it still remains tumah mimkor dameh, from the source of her blood. How does that fit in with this that the pasuk says that already in the 33 days there are days of purity? One must say, since Rashi says that this implies that till now she is called impure, although the impurity already expired, however, the name of impurity still remains on her. It's still not understood. Rashi is not a book of reasons of halachas. So what difference does it make in the understanding of the literal sense of interpretation of the pasuk, of the verse, to say that the reason of the prohibition to eat karbonis is because ad kan hikruyat me'ah. B. Since the tumah of the Yeledis already expired, the defilement, the impurity of the woman who gave birth already expired, why should it remain by her the name of impurity till she brings the carbon? So we'll understand this with another question. We already spoke many times that Rashi, in his commentary on Chumash, answers all questions that come up in the literal, learning the literal meaning of the pasuk. Why don't we find that Rashi should explain the reason why a woman who gives birth has to bring a chatas to forgive? What sin did she commit that she needs atonement? And this is a question which demands an answer in understanding the literal meaning of the pasuk, as indeed we find many commentaries on the Torah that stop to explain this. Even more, we find in Rashi, above that Rashi explains by a carbon oila, in which it says v'nir tzaloi lechaper olav. It says that the burnt offering will be accepted by God for him, to atone for him. And the Rashi explains, Al mahu meratzaloi, what does oila, carbon oila, have to forgive on? Al esev alav, there's certain, if a person was supposed to put on tefillin on a certain day, and he didn't put on tefillin that day, so he doesn't have to bring a carbon chatas, but he has to bring a carbon oila. So it's evident that we cannot say that Rashi relies on the explanation of the Gemara, that this is because many times while a woman is giving birth, from the sheer pain and agony that she's going through, she'll jump up and make an oath and say that she'll never have children again. And to atone for that sin, so the Gemara explains that to atone for that sin, that's why a woman has to bring a carbon chatas. And first of all, because Rashi doesn't say it, and he doesn't even allude to it. So we must say that the Ben Chumash Lemikra, a 5-year-old who learns Chumash, learns the Torah, understands it on his own according to the literal interpretation of the pasuk that he already learned, as will be explained. When we learn that Isha ki Tazria v'yolda, that when a woman has a child and she gives birth and she's bleeding, so the first 7 days if she's a boy, if she had a boy, and the first 14 days if she has a girl, she becomes impure, like the day of the nida of the blood that flows from her. The Parasha of Yeledus, it reminds immediately on the combination of a woman birth and pain as a punishment on a sin in the Parasha of Bereshis, that God had told Chava after her sin during the tree of knowledge, in which she ate a tree that was specifically forbidden by God to eat, because it looked like it tastes good. To the woman he said, I will increase your sadness and your pregnancy, you'll give birth with sadness. Each birth which comes as a result of a pregnancy, and she became pregnant and she gave birth, is in the manner of your sadness and your pregnancy, the pain of pregnancy. Be'etzav tel dibonim, with sadness you'll give birth to children. Tsar haleida, the pain of birth, has in itself a portion from the punishment on the sin of Eitz Hadas. Accordingly, it's understood that the reason of the tumah, of the defilement, of impurity of a Yeledus, even if she's not bleeding, in the literal sense of the pasuk, since birth is with pain as a result of the sin of Eitz Hadas, so it also brings tumah. From this it is understood why a woman who gave birth has to bring a carbon chatas for atonement, for her atonement, since in every birth by each woman there is from the sin of Eitz Hadas, therefore she has to bring on it for atonement. Similar to what Rashi already explained earlier concerning the sin of the Egel, constantly when I will bring on them their sins, I will bring upon them a little from this sin together with the other sins, and there's no punishment that comes upon a heathen in which there isn't a little of being paid back for the sin of the calf, the golden calf. According to this explanation in the impurity of giving birth, it is also explained what Rashi explains on the word vehikrivoi, that the kohen has to bring it closer for God. That which, since she brings 2 karbanos on oil and achatas, so we want to know on which carbon if it's brought first. Since the chatas becomes before the oil, when does she become pure? When you bring the chatas or when you bring the oil? So now she says that the purity, that the purity of the woman who gives birth depends only on the carbon chatas which comes for forgiveness, not in the oil. Because the tumah, this impurity comes to a concept that needs atonement, and therefore the purity of the tumah is connected with this, that she brings her kapara, her atonement. According to what above mentioned, it will be understood also the continuation in Rashi's commentary, that immediately after his above mentioned commentary on Vikrivai, in which he emphasizes that the purity of a Yeledus is connected with her forgiveness, He continues, V'tohara miklal she'ad kan hikruyat meya. After we know that the tumah v'yeledis, the impurity of the woman who gives birth, is connected with the chet eitz hadas, with the sin of tree of knowledge, and therefore her purity is connected with her kapara, with her forgiveness. It is understood that ad kan hikruyat meya, even after the tumah expired from her, but as long as she still did not have her forgiveness, she is still called impure. With this it is also understood what difference it makes, even according to Pshutei Shel Mikra, that till now she is called impure. If the prohibition of eating kodshim, of karbonos, of sacrifices, would have been only due to the fact that she's still lacking completeness of purity, so it has an area that the woman wouldn't rush to bring her carbon in order to be able to eat karbonos. We don't find an obligation on a yid to be in a situation of purity in order to be able to eat karbonos, unless it is before Yom Tov, since a person is obligated to purify himself in Yom Tov. However, since the fact that she is called impure till now is connected with this, that it's lacking by her atonement, so it is understood that she has to rush as soon as possible to be atoned. Chazal tell us that God, whatever He does, He tells Yidden to do. From this it is understood that just like God wants that Yidden shouldn't be even in a situation of being merely called impure, they should bring a carbon, a sacrifice for atonement. Likewise, the Eibishter, God consults Himself with Yidden, that when we're in exile and Yidden are called impure, as the rule of the Rambam, that every Yid in each time and each place, his will, according to the true Torah, is to do only the will of Hashem. And if he does sometimes differently, it is only due to an accident, being forced, especially after all the terrible decrees and pogroms that came against the Yidden, which are known as the birth pangs of Mashiach, which Yidden already went through, especially in our last generation. So the Eibishter takes Yidden out of the situation of kruyat tmeya, of being called defiled, and God forbid to say that anybody or anything can stop him, and it comes with the greatest swiftness. He wants only that by Yidden there should also be this yearning to go out swiftly, immediately, in the language of the Rambam, from exile, from the situation of kruyat meya, of being called impure, and come to the end of its purity, its atonement. And the redemption comes in a manner of Oru Imanon Ishmael, that where we come with the heavenly clouds, Achishena, the Eibishter will bring it, will rush it, and in Achishena, in rushing it, immediately Ba'gola Didan, in our quickness. And the Rebbe points out in footnote number 57, which is the numerical value of now, that the Radak, Reb David Kimchi, in his commentary on Yeshaya over there, on the pasuk Achishena, where the Eibishter says, "Be'ita Achishena," in its time I will rush it. And Radak says one can explain that when its time will come, I will rush it to finish it quickly, because it won't take a long time from when the help begins till it ends. What happens speedily nowadays.